What's up? Did you ever wonder what it is to be wise? Why did Socrates say that the only thing that he knew is that he knew nothing? Well, today you're in luck. On the Existential Stoic podcast, we're going to talk, but it's going to be on wisdom. I'm Danny, here with Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
Yeah, so did you ever think of this? Like, what does it mean to be wise? Because I think of this a lot. And like, I've noticed too, especially, and this is, I think, one of the reasons why I've been thinking about it a lot, is like, I notice as you get older too, like, a lot of things that seemed important when you're younger go away and you get more clarity, I think, is a good way to kind of describe maturity, is like, yeah, just clarity on things. But also,
Mhm.
it can go, I think, two ways where you can also get more sort of closed-minded over time instead of open-minded. And I think this is, wisdom. I've always thought of wisdom like reading all the philosophy I have and stuff. It's just being really open-minded and always open to learning and never sort of assuming that you know. I mean, think of Socrates' statement too. Like, the only thing I know is that I know nothing, right? Like, the more you know, the more you know you don't know, also. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tricky one. There was Solomon from the Bible, and that's a true story. So God said you can have anything, and he chose wisdom.
Yeah.
And then he was going to cut a baby in half, I think. But it solved the problem with
It did.
the
Oh
yeah,
yeah, right. With the two, because the two people were trying to claim. I remember.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. But yeah, wisdom is an interesting thing because it's definitely different from intelligence. Because you see some retarded people that are highly intelligent,
Yes.
and especially in like technology, there are people who are like supremely intelligent, but they just lack social graces, wisdom, a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, I think like intelligence is when we think of that. I think most. Well, I don't know. Maybe most people think of like that's like your skill smarts or book smarts, right? Like you factually know things or know how to do things, right? Is that what we kind of mean by it?
Yeah, well, I would think that like wisdom is more of a well-rounded type
Well,
of thing
yeah,
than
that's what I was trying to say. Like
intelligence.
intelligence is more specialization,
Like
I
I
guess.
remember when I was a kid, there was a kid who was like a certifiable genius, but he pooped himself and then walked around with it for days.
Yeah.
And so like it's like in one area, yes, very high IQ, but then not so much everywhere else.
Yeah, and I think you do see that a lot, though. I mean, you look back at, if you look at history, a lot of the brilliant people were also people that had a lot of social issues, as well, a lot of times. So it's not like, I mean, that's understandable, I think. But, and then I think is, like you said, like that's like high intelligence. You have specialization or specialized knowledge of something, and you're very gifted in that area. But wisdom always is sort of portrayed as this broader thing, right? And it has this sense of like, there is a sense of like maturity there too, because I think we tend to think of like, or especially back in the day, like the older people in a tribe were considered the wise ones, right? It would be like the elders. So I
Hmm.
think it also is something that like maturity is often tied to as well. But
Comes
it's
from experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting though because you see all these. I don't know. I always think of this a lot because you see all these philosophers talk about it, and it's like it seems the goal is wisdom, but they also realize that it's something that takes like a long time to accrue, if ever. And then it's also
Yeah.
interesting because they all seem to suggest that like the point of wisdom is like I said, it's like this open-mindedness and it's funny because it seems to be the opposite of what we normally think of as intelligence, which is like it's the admitting that you don't know things and the admitting that that things are still unknown rather than trying to fix everything with a certain sort of definition or value.
Hmm. Yeah. There's something along those lines in the Tao Te Ching where it talks about, the more you unlearn. That's I don't
Well,
know.
it's
I can't
funny
remember it
and
at this moment.
that's okay. I was gonna say it's funny because in Taoism, you get Nietzsche's three metamorphoses. He talks about, the child being the last phase of the spirit, right? Taoism, you get a similar thing. Buddhism also, this idea that like that childlike mind is more close to wisdom than, which is interesting because I think the childlike mind's non-judgmental, non-biased, right? It's open to new experiences. It's open to try things. I think that's kind of that side of it that really does speak of wisdom, which is interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, it
Right?
hasn't
Yeah.
hasn't been programmed by society yet.
Yeah. But you also mentioned too, like social graces, like soft skills, basically what we call now like soft skills. Like I think those are also important for that too. Like communication seems to be part of wisdom, right? Being able to like relate to people, understand people. It's yeah. I
Well,
know. I
because you would
think
need, in order to, you can't, well, I guess you could, but it would seem that part of wisdom is passing on that wisdom. And so if you would lack the social graces, you wouldn't be able to pass that on.
oh yeah, like teaching and stuff and being able to like communicate your ideas to others. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
there's
because
something
like
to that.
even like the Buddha, after he became enlightened, he realized that like he had a very difficult time teaching it to anybody else.
Yeah,
And he believed that until everybody's enlightened, no one's enlightened. So it's a challenging thing.
it is, and I think that's funny too, because Aristotle also said that, right? Like you only know something when you're able to teach it, basically. And so
Hmm.
maybe there is that side of it of being able to like not just it's not just trapped in your head, but you can communicate it to the world also. I like that. It's a good way of looking
Yeah.
at it. Yeah, it's tough because it's like, I think I wonder how many people actually strive for that too, like intelligence or wisdom. Because it's funny, like
No, just fame and money. That's the only
well,
thing
that's
that
what's
people
funny,
strive for.
it's funny because I remember reading all like this philosophy when I was an undergrad, especially like, and all these guys like talk about it and like talk about striving for it and all. And then you look around the world, it's like, I mean, granted, they were probably the select few of their time too, but it's funny to think that like the things we strive for are usually so far removed from this that like,
Yeah.
and I think that's why we struggle a lot too, because we're not focused on, you know,
Well, I think you summed it up really well, how like wisdom takes time. And we were talking earlier about how like we're very bad at predicting things in the far off distant future. So we're much more attracted to things that are more immediate. And like it seems like fame and money are much more immediate, whereas wisdom is just this thing that's like, oh, I've got to put in all this effort for how many decades until I finally get somewhere. And then nobody's going to recognize me for it. I'm not going to be able to support myself on like, it's like all this stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. And I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I get why people focus on the immediate too, because I mean, we're animals and,
Yeah.
probably evolutionarily, like, eating now is better than assuming you're going to eat later. So,
Yeah. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush.
yeah, that is a funny saying.
I know, right?
Some of them have no idea what they actually mean, like where it came from and what it actually is referring to. But yeah, man, no, it makes sense. I think like that's also part of it is it's something that you have to be committed to, but really just for yourself, which is a weird thing, right?
Can you live a good life without being wise?
Depends how you look at it. Yes, because I mean, well, that's the other funny thing that always kind of attracted me to this question was like, a lot of
Ignorance is bliss.
can be right, but a lot of
Yeah.
those, and a lot of philosophers like that's was basically their conception of the good life. Life was being wise, and yet at the same time, it's like, well, if it takes that long and it's that hard and not that many people are doing it, does that mean the rest of the people can't have a good life, or does it mean that their life's just going to be good in a different way, or what? You know?
Hmm.
Yeah, these
Yeah.
questions are tough.
Yeah.
We have a
Definitely.
lot of vague ideas about what we're aiming
So
at.
let's say somebody wanted to become wise and they weren't offered one wish, kind of like Solomon got. They actually had to work at it and become wise themselves. How would they go about doing it?
That is a good question.
I think reading's important.
Reading's hugely
Hell, a
important.
heck of an important. Like it is crazy because uh probably like 5 or 10 years ago, I was listening to Les Brown. He's like a motivational speaker. And he was talking about how he reads one book a week. And at the time, I was reading like 10 books, maybe. And I was like, one book a week? Holy freaking cow. Like, that's insane. But I was just like, I'll give it a whirl. So it took me a couple years to kind of get up to the pace of reading a book a week. But once you do that, you're exposed to so much information by
Yeah,
reading that stuff. And it's crazy because like I talk with people nowadays who like don't have the habit of reading. They have the habit of like playing on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or whatever or watching the
yeah,
news. And it's like the amount of stuff that I know compared with them is like immense, and the resources, and I would say part of that is wisdom, like
Yeah.
the good stuff that I've gleaned from the different books.
No, I agree. And I think like the fact that like getting things out of those books too and tying them together, that's part of wisdom too. I think it's seeing the connections. But I totally agree with you. I think reading's great. And like it's funny too, because I don't think it even matters what type of reading you do. Like, because I noticed this myself, like even like because I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy. I enjoy it. But
Even the
even in
romance novels with Fabio on the
oh
cover.
yeah, heck yeah, right? But even in those, right, you do get well maybe not Fabio as much, but at least the sci-fi in there. You do get, you get some, there's world building, you get human experience, you get, you get a lot of things that are, even though it might not be a real world or a real story they're portraying, you get a lot of lessons of knowledge, of ideas about humanity, about social interactions. Like I think there's so much in there still, so it's still valuable. But and to that point, like you can read, I mean, there's just endless amounts of information out there that we can consume. I think that is part of being wise is choosing how you spend your time and where you kind of focus your attention. I also think a big part of
Mm.
it too is being open-minded. Like I was saying before, like being able to recognize like what knowledge is and that we probably don't have it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the biggest
Yeah,
danger
maybe.
too, like you put yourself in a box when you think you know something, like and you pigeonhole yourself, you put yourself in a box and you can't see
Yeah.
anything outside that box, right? And I think that's a
Hmm.
huge part of it. So yeah, open-mindedness and reading can help with that as well.
Yeah, seeing your own limitations.
Yeah. And humanities.
Yeah. Do you think someone needs to study philosophy in order to be wise?
Not particular. I mean, I think it would help. I don't know that it's necessary,
Yeah.
but like
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of good. I think philosophy is a good place to go because that's its interest. That tends to be its focus. So I think that is a good place, especially like the ancients. Has a huge focus for them, and there's a lot of good things there. So I would say like, yeah, I think it's valuable. I don't think it's necessary because even
Hmm.
like mythology and stuff can offer a lot of similar, I think, benefits. I think it's more about just getting yourself to think about these things and reflect on them and kind of think
Hmm.
critically about stuff, which we don't teach anymore. And I think that's one of the things that's fallen to the wayside that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. We're all just getting our brains downloaded into with a bunch of, and it's like it's just like constant advertising
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see it too with like like that whole like, well, with the election coming up, people are talking about the, the fake news articles and like all this stuff. And you see it with that because they get passed around because people aren't even reading them. They don't even know what the content is. And they're not,
Uh-huh.
they're just, they're acting on pure emotion basically rather than thinking about it. And I think that's the other thing is like wisdom is that voice that tells you to stop before you hit
Hmm.
send and kind of like
Yeah.
start asking yourself questions about the thing before you actually do something with it, right? Like, is this actually real? Should I look up other
Yeah.
sources? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I remember there were some books that I read on a while ago where like the fake stories actually get more traction than the real ones
By like
by
a
a
thousand
significant
fold.
factor.
It's like a
Yeah.
thousand, yeah. I remember reading
Yeah.
that article. They were testing out it was lies and truth on Twitter, I think it was.
Yeah.
And other social media. Yeah, and it was like a thousand fold. And even when you post like a correction, like so if
Uh-huh.
there was like something big, that got like zero, like no traction, so it didn't matter. But that's the problem
Yeah.
because those things, you also have to real. I think that's also part of it is understanding like how things work in the background. All that stuff is very much, social media is about trending stuff is about emotion. It's about like excitement and crazier stuff is going to go better, right? Because it's going to be more outlandish or it's going to jar your emotions a certain way stronger. Something factual is not going to be that exciting, you know? It's
Nope.
just,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's
Not at
that's
all.
the problem. But yeah,
Not at all.
I think
Yeah.
reading's a good one. I would also add communication, talking to people. Yeah.
You mean I have to talk to
I
people?
have to
Oh
actually talk to
man,
people. But
I
yeah,
want to sit in my ivory tower.
and just hang out and read books all day.
Yeah.
That is a
Yeah,
nice
right?
life too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it. That's good. On wisdom, we've talked about it, we've thought about it. It is hard, it takes a lifetime. If you enjoyed this, we'll be back later with you in another episode of the Existential Stoic Podcast. Check us out wherever you get podcasts or on YouTube. Like, subscribe, listen a lot. Until next time, though, later, Andy.
There, Danny.